What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Talking Tunes with Sean. This is the continuation of the greatest albums of all time, my favorite albums of all time, a mini series within a series. I got another, I think seven more. So let's check them out. Dream Theater, Images and Words. What more can I say about Dream Theater? Amazing vocals, amazing, talented band, but Images and Words was always one of my favorite albums. The atmospheric sound of this album. Look at this. Tracks like Pull Me Under, Another Day, Surrounded, Under a Glass Moon, Wait for Sleep. Amazing album. One of my favorite albums of all time. That's why it's in this list. Greatest albums of all time. This definitely earns the spot in my top of the top. Check this album out. If you're new to Dream Theater, I would definitely start with this one. This one just really sets the bar as far as I'm concerned. This really demonstrates the band. Everything from just the fucking amazing vocals, but also the stunning instruments and just the talent of this band alone. It's almost really in itself a greatest hits album, as is a lot of their albums. The band that could do no wrong. I've never had a Dream Theater album that disappointed, but this one is one of the best. Korn, Follow the Leader. How could I not mention this album? This album is one of my favorites. Looking back, I remember when this album came out, and I just remember just being stunned by because the sound that they brought with like the more like the hip hoppy grooves and the that whole rap metal scene, but sticking with the Korn vibe, but they were bringing like new elements into it, and it just worked. And this was a really stunning album, and I remember them going on tour with this album, and it's just, that Follow the Leader was just really something. Freak on a Leash, Got the Life, the music videos were just, I remember taping them with my VCR player and just rewatching them over and over and over again. Oh my God, Dead Bodies Everywhere, BBK. Wow. All in the Family. There you go. With Fred Durst. This was some album, boy. This was really showcasing Korn back in the day. I think this was like at their height, at their prime. And this was really a breakthrough album. It really was, into the mainstream. But it was just a good album. It was a different album. This was big in school, man. I used to bring this on my disc player, my CD Walkman, and I would always crank this during study class. Slipknot, self-titled. The start of it all. I remember introducing my entire high school to this CD and to this band. But Eyeless, Sick, Wait and Bleed, this CD, to this day, is a freaking classic, and why it made my greatest albums of all time. Because I probably spun this album until the CD wore out. And actually, I went through a couple copies of this album. I had the original, like the black version of the CD. I remember bringing this into school, and our lockers. I'll never forget this. It was this, and I believe it was Soulfly's album. It was this and Soulfly's album that our lockers got broken into. Okay? This album got stolen. And I remember I was like distraught, and I had to go and buy it again. At the time, it was The Wall in the mall was our music store, or it was Sam Goody, or it was whatever one it was. But anyway, Slipknot, self-titled, a fucking classic. Metallica, the Black Album. Oh my God. I've mentioned some of their older stuff before, Ride the Lightning, but my God, this album. You want to talk about a fucking greatest hits album? Every song on this CD is fucking stellar. You know, it's funny, I'm on here on Amazon and I see on the end there, audio DVD. You know, I actually bought those. I was into all the formats. I actually had audio, DVD, which died quickly, and they were very expensive, but the fucking sound was phenomenal. There's another album I'm going to be mentioning soon. I actually had this format in, but then there was also dual-layer discs. I don't know if you guys remember them, but you could actually flip them, and the second half of the disc was on the other side. I had them too, but I had it all. But I had a Foo Fighters CD that was dual-layered. The Black Album, what a fucking amazing CD. Just amazing. I have this in vinyl. I have it in everything. Cassette, whatever. The Black Album is a no-brainer. A classic. What more can I say? No Rest for the Wicked. Ozzy Osbourne. One of my favorite Ozzy CDs ever. I think that this track listing is just... I could tell you stories and go into detail about this album. More than I can of any album that you're going to see on this series. Because I grew up with this album, but I remember being so fucking scared as a kid with this album because of the sounds, the devil, the moans, the groans, the atmospheric evilness of this album. This album was like straight from hell for its time. And I remember like the beginning of Devil's Daughter, Bloodbath in Paradise. This was one of those albums where if you put it in reverse, you could hear all kinds of subliminal messaging. This fucking album was so fucking evil and crazy and spooky. But what a well done album. And I remember growing up, my dad used to have a white van. And we used to drive around in it. And my father used to crank this on cassette. And my father always had this fucking playing. And I remember fucking like Bloodbath in Paradise, fucking Breaking All the Rules. At the beginning of that fucking song, with fucking, you know, the beginning of Zakk Wylde, Miracle Man, Devil's Daughter, Holy War, Crazy Babies, Breaking All the Rules, Bloodbath in Paradise. Every one of these fuckers, Demon Alcohol, Tattoo Dancer, every one of these songs is a hit. But it's not just that. It's the whole album altogether is such a experience. It's the flow of the album. You know, we talk a lot about albums and what makes them great. And it's the flow and chemistry of the songs together on the one album. How the songs flow, how the songs go from one song to another, and how the whole album tells a story. You know, we talk about how kids today download these songs on iTunes and they download like one or two songs off of an album. What a fucking horrible fucking disgrace to music. That's not the way music was intended, and that's not what the artist intended music to be. It was about looking at the artwork, about looking at the liner notes, the lyrics, the expanded, you know, artwork, and listening to track and dissecting it and talking about each track. You know, when I was in school, we would go home on release day. We would listen to the album, and then the next day in school, we would talk about the album. This was before the internet, before YouTube. I'll never forget, on release day, me and my friends would get our albums, and we would pre-order them and get them, and we would go to the record store, and sometimes my friends wouldn't get the album, or they wouldn't get the album on time, or they wouldn't be able to get to the record store. I'll never forget this. My friend Nick was so into music that he would call me on my house phone, my house line, and make me play him the album over the phone because he couldn't wait to hear it. That's how music was back then. You know, it's very different now with the digital era, and it's a shame. My point of this conversation is that this was an album that you would listen to the whole way through, and it was just a phenomenal experience. And it was something that we took very serious. And I remember growing up and saying, man, what a fucking album this was. What an amazing fucking album. To this day, I feel the same. Empire by Queensryche, exactly the same feelings for this album. Just the entire album was a phenomenal album. This was another album that I bought on 64-bit audio DVD. And this was such an atmospheric, progressive album. A lot of Queensryche albums were like concept. Like, I know a lot of people say their favorite Queensryche album of all time was Operation Mindcrime. Operation Mindcrime was also one of my favorite albums of all time. But Empire was always my number one Queensryche album. Thin Line, Empire, Silent Lucidity, Best I Can. Anybody out there? It was an amazing, amazing album. Amazing album. Amazing album. I mean, you want to talk about sound, like when you put your headphones on and you would hear this album, the shit you would hear in the background and the atmospheric. Oh, what an album. Kid Rock, Devil Without a Cause, one of my favorite albums of all time, because this album was such a unique and different and kick-ass album for its time. I remember, I'll never forget this. I remember when, this was during the big rap metal scene, but I remember I was in my room, or I was in another room, and I was doing something, and MTV was playing. Imagine MTV played music at the time. Could you believe that? Whether it was Total Request Live with Carson Daly, or it was something. And I was in my room. Maybe that's what it was. And the TV was in the other room. And I was doing whatever, and I wasn't listening. I wasn't paying attention. And Ba Wada Ba came on. And I went like this. And I stopped whatever I was doing. I was putting my fucking video game collection away, back on the shelf. I don't know. And I said, the fuck? What is that? And I ran in the room and I watched it. And I watched the Ba Wada Ba, the video, and I said, holy shit, this is amazing. Dude. And I remember I got this album and I was so hooked into Kid Rock. Kid Rock is a lot different today with the whole country and everything. But Kid Rock back then, American Badass, I Am the Bull God, Devil Without a Cause, the song, Joe C., Twisted Brown Trucker. You had the whole Uncle Cracker come from this. This was an amazing fucking kick-ass album. I remember bringing this album to school, and everybody would get a kick out of the CD. They would open up my Walkman. Remember one time they made me show my teacher the CD, and she was like flipping out because the CD, if those of you that remember, had the middle finger on the CD. Oh man, this was a fucking awesome album. Again, an album that I probably put thousands of hours in. I probably spun the shit out of this album. And to this day, when I hear these songs, I know every lyric word for word. This is like distilled in my brain. You know what I mean? Like, this is embedded in my brain, this album. And it's a classic, and that's why it's on this list, and I love it. And what a great album. Thank you guys for joining me. This is my greatest albums of all time. This is a mini-series within my Talking Tunes with Sean series. We got lots more coming, all different genres. I'm going to be thinking about the next group for the next episode of my favorite albums of all time, so keep an eye out for that. Take care, and I'll be seeing you guys on the next episode.